Have you ever woken up thinking it would be just another ordinary day, only to find that your life would never be the same again? That was my reality on October 12th, 2023. My name is Alice Astrid, and what I'm about to share with you is more than a story. It's a truth that transformed everything I thought I knew about prayer, faith, and reality itself. It started like any other Thursday morning. I was running late for work at the hospital, sipping my coffee while navigating the familiar stretch of road that always seemed to blur into routine. The autumn air was crisp, and the sunlight filtered through the trees, scattering golden light across the pavement. I remember feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. I worked as a respiratory therapist, and my mind was preoccupied with my patients, especially little Tommy, a boy in the pediatric ward battling severe asthma. As I rounded a bend, my thoughts drifted, not to the road but to a quick, half-hearted prayer I'd whispered that morning. "God, just help me get through today," I'd said. Routine words, more like a habit than a heartfelt plea. Little did I know, my understanding of prayer was about to be rewritten in ways I could never have imagined. The truck came out of nowhere. One moment, I was scanning the horizon for the next curve. The next, there was a deafening crash, the shattering of glass, and a force that threw my car like a toy. Later, I'd learned that the semi-truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel after a long shift, veering into my lane with devastating consequences. But in that moment, all I knew was chaos. Time seemed to slow. I felt the jarring impact, saw flashes of light, and then a stillness. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car. I wasn't in the hospital. I wasn't anywhere I recognized. Instead, I found myself in a place that defied description. It was as if I were suspended in a vast expanse of shimmering light, but it wasn't light as we know it. It was alive, pulsating, swirling, and filled with a profound sense of peace. The air itself, if you could call it air, hummed with energy. I wasn't alone. A figure stepped forward, radiant and unearthly. He wasn't like the angels I'd imagined as a child. His form was luminous, almost translucent, yet undeniably present. His voice didn't speak to my ears, but resonated within me. "You have been brought here for a purpose," he said, his tone steady and weighty. "What you are about to see will change you forever." I wanted to speak, to ask where I was, but before I could form the words, the scenery around me shifted. Threads of light, vibrant and intricate, began weaving through the space. They seemed to connect everything, an infinite tapestry of energy and movement. "What is this?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "These are prayers," the figure said simply. "And now you will witness their true power." At first, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Prayers? These threads of light, glowing and moving like living things, were prayers? They didn't look like the words I whispered before falling asleep, or the desperate cries for help I'd uttered in my toughest moments. But as I focused, I began to understand. Each thread was unique, some shimmering like golden beams, others softer, like pastel ribbons floating on a breeze. They pulsed with a rhythm, as if alive, and their colors shifted with an intensity one couldn't explain. Every prayer offered from a sincere heart, the being said, becomes part of this tapestry. Watch closely. One thread drew my attention. It blazed a brilliant white, cutting through the others like a laser. It was strong, purposeful, and direct. As I followed its path, I saw it connect to a scene. A woman kneeling by a hospital bed, her hands clasped tightly. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered fervent words. I couldn't hear her, but I could feel the weight of her prayer, her raw desperation. "Who is she praying for?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "For her child," the being replied. "Her faith has given this prayer strength, aligning it with the will of God." I watched, captivated, as the thread of light grew brighter and began influencing the world around it. It reached a doctor in the same hospital, subtly nudging his thoughts. He paused, then recalled a similar case from years ago. A breakthrough. He knew what to do next. The prayer thread didn't stop there. It radiated outward, creating ripples that touched a nurse, inspiring her to offer extra care, and even reached the child's immune system, reinforcing it in ways I could scarcely believe. "This is how prayer works," I asked, my voice shaking. "It's not just words. It changes reality. Prayer," the being said, "is far more than words. It is energy, intention, and faith interwoven with the Creator's design. It has the power to transform, to heal, to guide, but only when offered with sincerity and alignment with God's will." Not all prayers, I realized, carried the same power. The being directed my attention to another thread, dim, flickering, almost lost in the vast tapestry. "Why is this one so weak?" I asked. "Because it lacks faith," he said. It was spoken without conviction, more out of habit than belief. "Watch." I saw the prayer struggle to move, barely reaching beyond the one who uttered it. It faded before it could connect to anything else. My heart sank. But what about people who try? Isn't any prayer better than none? The being's expression softened. Even the smallest prayer matters, but its strength depends on the heart behind it. Those who pray with genuine faith, love, and humility tap into the divine flow that sustains the universe. Watch again. Another thread appeared, this one golden and intertwined with others. "This is collective prayer," the being explained. I gasped as I saw its magnitude. The combined prayers of a group were like a symphony, harmonizing and amplifying each other. Together, they created waves of light that surged through the tapestry, altering events with an unmistakable force. "This is why prayer in unity is so powerful," the being said. "When people pray together, they create resonance. They open channels for divine intervention that individual prayers alone might not achieve." I couldn't look away. Each prayer, each thread, revealed a world I'd never known existed, a hidden dimension where faith and intention shaped the fabric of reality. And yet, the most sobering realization was yet to come. What about unanswered prayers? I asked, my voice trembling. The being's gaze turned solemn. No prayer goes unanswered, but not all are answered in the way humans expect. Some outcomes align with God's greater plan, beyond what you can see. Others remain stored, awaiting the right moment to influence events. "Stored?" I asked, confused. He gestured, and suddenly, I was standing in what I can only describe as a vast cosmic archive. It was endless, filled with shimmering orbs of light, each pulsing faintly. "Every prayer ever uttered exists here," he said. "And their effects ripple across time, past, present, and future. Some prayers offered centuries ago still influence the world today. Others will fulfill their purpose long after you are gone." I was overwhelmed. How could something as simple as prayer hold so much power? And what did this mean for the way I had prayed in the past? "Your prayers," the being said gently, as if reading my thoughts, "have shaped your life more than you realize. Now you must learn to use this gift with intention." Before I could ask what he meant, the light around us began to shift again. I felt a pull, as though being called back to the physical world. "Wait!" I cried out. "I need to understand more." But the being's voice echoed with calm authority. "You've seen enough for now. Use what you've learned to change your world, and help others do the same." And with that, I was gone, back to the place I had left behind. I woke with a gasp, my heart racing. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the monitors beside me. I touched my chest instinctively, expecting to feel something. Heat, pressure, a mark of the extraordinary experience I'd just had. But there was nothing. Physically, I was unchanged. Yet everything was different. My mind replayed the vision, the golden threads of prayer weaving through time and space. Could it have been real? Or had my oxygen-starved brain conjured it during my near-death experience? The logical part of me wanted to dismiss it, but deep down, I knew what I'd seen was no hallucination. The truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. If prayer could alter reality, if it could reach across dimensions and orchestrate events, then every word I'd spoken in prayer, or failed to speak, mattered. My thoughts drifted to my daughter, Emma. She'd been the reason for my panic that night, the reason I'd overexerted myself and ended up in the hospital. She was struggling, caught in a web of anxiety and self-doubt. I had prayed for her, yes, but in a hurried, distracted way, half-hearted words spoken between chores and errands. Now, I saw my prayers in a new light. Were they the weak, flickering threads the being had shown me? Had I failed her by not praying with the conviction and faith she deserved? I needed to know. As soon as I was discharged, I went home and found Emma sitting in her room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up at me, her face pale and withdrawn. "Mom," she said softly, "are you okay?" I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. "I'm fine, sweetheart. But I need to ask you something. Have you been feeling lost? Like you're carrying a weight you can't explain." Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "How did you know?" "Because I'd seen it. I couldn't explain how, but in that otherworldly place, I'd felt her struggle as if it were my own. "I've been praying for you," I said. "But I need to do better. Can we pray together now?" She hesitated, then nodded. As we clasped hands and closed our eyes, I felt something stir within me, a determination I hadn't known before. I prayed aloud, pouring out every ounce of love and faith I had, asking for guidance, strength, and peace for my daughter. The words came naturally, as if they weren't entirely my own. And as I spoke, I felt a shift, a warmth spreading through the room. Emma squeezed my hand, and when I opened my eyes, I saw a lightness in her expression that hadn't been there before. Over the next few days, I committed myself to prayer like never before. Not just for Emma, but for everyone I loved. I prayed with focus, picturing those golden threads reaching into the heavens, weaving into the tapestry I'd glimpsed. And then the changes began. Emma's demeanor brightened. She started opening up, sharing thoughts and fears she'd kept bottled up for months. Opportunities one hadn't anticipated began to surface. Unexpected job offers, reconciled relationships, even a neighbor who knocked on our door just to say he'd been thinking of us. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. My prayers were rippling outward, touching lives in ways I couldn't fully understand. One night, as I reflected on everything, I remembered the vast archive of prayers the being had shown me. Stored, he'd said, awaiting the right moment. Had my prayers from years ago been stored too? The ones I'd whispered as a young mother, desperate to provide for Emma when times were tough? The ones I'd cried out during my darkest days, when I couldn't see a way forward. The thought filled me with hope and responsibility. Prayer wasn't just a lifeline for the moment. It was a seed planted for the future, a force that could transcend time and transform lives long after I was gone. But the experience also left me with questions I couldn't ignore. If prayer was so powerful, why didn't everyone see its effects? Why did some prayers seem unanswered, leaving people disillusioned and doubting? The answer, I realized, was one I had to discover for myself. My journey wasn't over. If anything, it had only just begun. I knew one thing for certain. Prayer wasn't just a ritual or a habit. It was a gift, a bridge between the finite and the infinite. And now, I was determined to walk that bridge with purpose, trusting that each step mattered more than I could ever imagine. But what lay ahead? And how would I use this newfound understanding to help others? Those questions lingered, pulling me toward the unknown, where answers waited to be revealed. The days turned into weeks, and life returned to its steady rhythm. Or so it seemed. Yet, beneath the surface, a shift had occurred, one I couldn't ignore. My experience during the near-death episode had awakened me to a reality I'd never considered. Life wasn't just about the visible. It was deeply intertwined with the unseen. One evening, as I prepared for bed, the memory of the being's voice replayed in my mind. The threads are fragile but powerful. What you weave determines much. The words carried a weight I didn't fully grasp at the time. But now they echoed with urgency. It started with a dream. I found myself standing in a barren field, the air thick with tension. In the distance, dark clouds swirled, and shadows moved unnaturally, their forms shifting and growing as they approached. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but not alone. A soft light glimmered at my feet. When I looked down, I saw golden threads stretching in every direction, some strong and vibrant, others frayed and barely holding together. I recognized them instantly, the prayers I had been weaving since my hospital stay. The shadows crept closer, their presence oppressive. And then I understood. These weren't just figments of a dream. They were forces, dark and deliberate, seeking to sever the threads and unravel what I had worked so hard to strengthen. I dropped to my knees, clutching at the golden strands. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You can't take this. These prayers, they matter." As if in response, the threads began to glow brighter, their warmth spreading through my hands. A surge of courage filled me. I closed my eyes and prayed, not out of fear, but with fierce determination. "God, you are stronger than anything in this world. Protect what you have called me to build. Guard the lives of those I lift to you. Let your will be done." When I opened my eyes, the light had expanded, pushing back the shadows. A figure emerged from the brightness, cloaked in radiance and armed with a sword that shimmered like liquid fire. "You're not alone," the figure said, its voice both gentle and commanding. "Every prayer calls forth a response, though not always in ways you see. Trust in the one who weaves all things together." Before I could speak, the scene faded, and I woke in my bed, breathless and covered in a cold sweat. But this wasn't like any dream I'd had before. It felt more real than the world I'd returned to. The message was clear. Prayer wasn't just an act of faith. It was a battle, a partnership with the divine to stand against forces I couldn't fully comprehend. I began to notice the spiritual undercurrents in everyday life. A friend called, confiding in me about her crumbling marriage. My first instinct was to offer advice, but instead I paused. "Can we pray about this together?" I asked. Her hesitation mirrored my own doubts from before, but she agreed. As we prayed, I felt the familiar warmth of the threads weaving into something greater. When we finished, her voice was steadier, her tears replaced with a cautious hope. Not all prayers yielded immediate results. Some days felt like shouting into an empty void, waiting for an echo that never came. But I remembered the archives of prayers I'd seen, the ones waiting for the right moment. Faith wasn't about instant gratification. It was about trust. One night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Mom, do you think God hears me when I pray?" I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. He hears every word. And even when we don't see it, he's working on our behalf. Prayer is like planting seeds. Sometimes it takes time, but the harvest always comes." Her smile was small but genuine, and I knew the lesson wasn't just for her. It was for me too. The experience had changed everything. Prayer wasn't just a quiet moment before meals or bedtime. It was a force, a connection, a lifeline to the eternal. But I also knew the battle wasn't over. The shadows I'd seen in my dream were real, and they wouldn't give up easily. Yet I wasn't afraid. I had learned that my prayers, fragile as they might feel, were part of something far greater. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I whispered a final prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for showing me the truth. Help me to stay faithful, even when the road is hard. Let my prayers be a light in the darkness, a thread in your masterpiece." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept without fear, knowing that I was never alone in this unseen battle.